Hundreds of companies and executives have signed a new statement opposing, quote, discriminatory legislation that makes it harder for people to vote. Amazon, Google, and Warren Buffett were among those who signed. It is the next move after leaders from these companies and more met virtually over the weekend to discuss a response to efforts by Republicans to overhaul voting laws. Most notably, Georgia's new law that overhauls voting in the state. One of the companies at that meeting was our parent company, Viacom CBS. Earlier, I spoke with Nsé Ufot, the CEO of the New Georgia Project, and asked her what message this meeting sends and who is the intended audience.
I think the message that it is sending is that this is not a partisan issue, if you will. It's not just a Georgia issue, that there are 47 states that are currently deliberating anti-voting bills, and that this is a direct attack on our democracy, and that many of these CEOs have acknowledged that this moment requires them to be vocal in declaring sort of which side they're on, if they're on the side of American democracy and the freedom to vote, free from interference and free from intimidation, or if they are siding with the people who are proponents of the big lie. I think that it is an acknowledgement that their customers are American voters who will be impacted by this, that many of their employees are American voters that will be impacted by this, as well as themselves, that many of the CEOs that we understand participated in this weekend's call are American voters themselves. And so this is an issue that cuts across all sectors of society, and that now is not the time for the corporate community to be silent.
And of course, you yourself worked to increase voter turnout in the 2020 presidential election in Georgia as part of the New Georgia Project. What implications do you think this new Georgia voting law could have there?
Well, if any one of these provisions were the law of the land in November and certainly in January, we would have seen different electoral outcomes. That given that we had some of the most safe and secure elections in Georgia's history, that there are many people who are reasonably assured that the will of the people was reflected in the results of our elections. And that encourages participation. People know and understand that their vote will count, that their voice will be heard in choosing our electors. And so, again, if any of these provisions had been the law of the land, it would have suppressed enough votes to overturn the outcome of these elections. And so, as they're talking about, confidence in our elections and our election system, I think that it is really important for us to continue to point out that fact, that it is only the proponents of the big lie, those who are saying that our former president actually won the election, that they are the ones who are sort of adamant about nefarious sort of shenanigans happening in the last election cycle. And so making sure that disinformation doesn't destabilize our government, that misinformation isn't allowed to continue to attack people's confidence in our elections infrastructure is just as important as making sure that, again, the will of the people is reflected in the results of our elections, and that we don't have corporate leaders and other people from the private sector knowingly or unknowingly funding voter suppression.
And the Brennan Center, which tracks voting proposals across the country, found that at least 24 states have bills that would restrict voting access. So, being someone who was so close to the ground in Georgia during the last election, what do you think needs to be done, first of all, about the law in Georgia, but second of all, for the potential for similar laws to pass in other states?
Right. So that number is definitely closer to 47 in this moment. I think that one, what we've done is we've joined our allies, Black Voters Matter and RISE, which is a youth organizing group, to sue on constitutional grounds to overturn the Georgia law. I think the second thing, and what we are asking directly of CEOs and others, is to support HR 1 and HR 4. That it is beyond time that we had a federal standard for elections across the country in all of our states, right? So a standard in terms of, how many days that state voters are allowed to early vote, how drop boxes will be treated, how vote by mail will be treated. That I think that is one of the most efficient and one of the most effective ways that we have to mute the impact of this well-funded, well-coordinated, unpatriotic anti-voting campaign that we are seeing Republicans push in Georgia and 46 other states.
All right. Well, Nsé Ufot, thank you so much for your insight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.